Act 4 of The Mind the Paint Girl by Arthur Pinero. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The scene is the same as in the preceding act, but the light outside is brighter and warmer, and in the room is more diffused. On the table in the center, placed close to the settee, there is a small tray with a breakfast of tea and toast upon it. The bedroom door is partly open. Lily, wan and red-eyed, is lying propped up by cushions upon the settee. A newspaper is on her lap, but she is gazing at vacancy. She is in negligee. A dainty morning robe covers her nightgown. Her bare feet are in slippers, and her hair is in a simple knot. Maud is at one of the drawers of the cupboard at the back, engaged in selecting some articles of lingerie, and Mrs. Upjohn, completely dressed for the day, is sitting in the armchair by the center table, her face hidden by a newspaper which she is reading. Presently Maud shuts the drawer, and carrying the lingerie comes forward. Maud to Lily.
What frock will you put on?
Lily, starting slightly.
Eh? One of your embroidered muslins, or your ninon?
Lily, languidly.
Either. I don't care.
Oh, gracious. What on earth is the matter with you this morning? I've never known you as queer as this after any hop you've been to in my time.
To Mrs. Upjohn, who has lowered her paper.
Nothing wrong, is there?
Lily, turning over her and burying her head in the cushions.
Maud.
Maud, moving to the settee and bending over Lily.
Here I am, lovey.
Go into the next room and shut the door. And don't let me see your stupid, fat face till I come to you.
That's better.
Going to the bedroom door.
That's how I like to hear her talk. We needn't send for Dr. Gilson yet a while.
She disappears into the bedroom and closes the door. Mrs. Upjohn, looking at Lily.
Lil,
Yes, Mother?
have another cup of tea, won't you?
No.
Another bit of toast, then?
No.
Smoke a cigarette?
No.
You always do have a whiff after your breakfast. Come.
No.
Mrs. Upjohn, rising and walking away.
Oh dear, deuce take Carlton Smythe and his supper party. Those are my sentiments, and Lal Roper, busybody that he is. Things were going on with us as smooth and peaceful as could be before this upset.
Lily, raising herself angrily.
You were in it, Mother. You were as much to blame as anybody.
Mrs. Upjohn, halting.
Ow, in it.
In Uncle Lal's artful plan to prevent Nico from being invited. You've confessed you were.
Lal twisted me round his little finger. I was claying the potter's hand, as your dad was fond of saying.
Lily, changing her position.
If only Nico had been there, I shouldn't have given young Farncombe all those dances, nor wandered about with him in the intervals, nor allowed him to see me home. It all simply couldn't have happened.
Hitting a cushion.
Oh.
Sitting up and embracing her knees.
Mother.
Mrs. Upjohn, behind the settee.
What?
Lily, knitting her brows.
I'm so surprised at myself.
Surprised?
So disappointed with myself.
Why, you haven't done anything that's not quite respectable, Lil. On the contrary.
No, I haven't done anything that's actually not nice. But fancy.
Mrs. Upjohn, close to Lily.
Fancy?
Lily, opening her eyes widely.
Fancy my letting myself go with young Farncombe as I did. He'd been admiring me from a distance for weeks and weeks, but I'd scarcely noticed him till last night.
Leaning her head against Mrs. Upjohn softly.
I always thought I was such a cold girl, Mother, in that way.
I suppose it was what's called love at first sight, Lil.
Lily laughing shamefacedly, putting her feet to the ground and shielding her face with her hands.
Oh, don't talk rot, Mother.
Mrs. Upjohn moving away.
Anyhow, it's not too late, Lil. Even now.
Not too late?
Mrs. Upjohn behind the center table.
To back out, dearie. The captain couldn't possibly hold you to a hasty promise given him between 4 and 5 in the morning.
Oh, how can you? I've passed my word to Nico, and I wouldn't break it for £20,000.
Looking up.
Mother?
Mrs. Upjohn fussing with the things upon the table.
Yes?
Lily resolutely.
I'm going to pull Nico up, Mother. I've dragged him down, and I mean to raise him.
Clenching her hands.
So help me God, I do.
Well, you've got a tough job before you, Lil, in my opinion.
Perhaps, but I mean to succeed.
After a pause.
Besides...
Besides?
Lily slowly.
I've told you, Nico or no Nico, I'm determined. I'm determined not to draw Eddie Farncope into my net.
Into your net?
Another pause.
Lil?
Eh?
That's twice you've made use of that remark. Who's accused you?
There is a lively rat-tat at the door on the left.
Come in.
The door opens and Jimmy Birch bounces into the room. Jimmy as she closes the door.
Ah, Ma. Ah, Lilims.
Good morning.
Jimmy kissing Mrs. Upjohn.
We've met before, this morning, haven't we?
Coming to Lily.
Well, dear old girl, and how are you today?
Kissing Lily and then eyeing her keenly.
A wreck?
Rather.
I ought to be, but I'm not. Directly I laid my pretty head on my pillow, I went off, and never stirred till I found the breakfast tray on my chest.
Reckoning on her fingers.
5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11. I've had 6 hours. That's not so dusty.
To Lily slyly.
You didn't sleep very soundly, probably?
Not very.
Jimmy smiling from ear to ear.
Excited?
Lily shrugs her shoulders. There is a silence, and then Jimmy, still beaming, looks round and sees that Mrs. Upjohn has seated herself upon the fauteuil stool.
May I sit down for a minute?
Of course, Jimmy, do.
Jimmy sits in the armchair by the center table, awaiting some communication which doesn't come. Mrs. Upjohn drums upon the table with her fingers, and Lily busies herself with rearranging the cushions on the settee. Jimmy, after a while.
Hope I haven't dropped in too early.
Lily settling her shoulders into the cushions.
Not a bit, dear.
It's nearly 12:30. I dashed round.
After another pause, unable to restrain herself further.
Any news? Anything to tell me?
Mrs. Upjohn abruptly.
Yes.
What?
Lil's engaged.
Ha!
Triumphantly.
Ha ha!
Clapping her hands and beating her feet upon the floor.
Ha ha ha!
Jumping up and sitting beside Lily and hugging and kissing her.
Oh, yum, yum, yum. Oh, you humbugs.
Rising and rushing to Mrs. Upjohn and embracing her.
You solemn humbug, Ma.
Leaving Mrs. Upjohn and singing and dancing to the refrain sung in the previous act.
Oh, if you would only love me. If you would merely say.
Her voice gradually dying away as she sees that the expression on Lily's face and upon Mrs. Upjohn's doesn't alter.
Wait but a little.
standing still.
Little for me?
Mrs. Upjohn caustically.
Yes, you had better wait a little. You better wait till you hear who. She's engaged too.
Who to?
Lily studying her nails.
Whom to, mother?
Why, isn't it
No, it ain't. It's the cap'n.
the cap?
To Lily.
Nico?
Lily nods. Jimmy draws a deep breath.
Oh.
Lily calmly.
Nico turned up here early this morning, while Eddie, Lord Fernco was with me, in fact, and the three of us, we talked matters over, and...
Jimmy, her eyes starting out of her head.
Was there a row?
Oh, don't be so curious, Jimmy. Poor Nico has been after me for 6 years. A girl must play the game, if she's at all decent and wishes to preserve a shred of self-respect.
Again there is a pause. Then Jimmy silently resumes her seat in the armchair. Mrs. Upjohn moistening her lips with her tongue to Jimmy.
How do you feel about it?
Jimmy thoughtfully.
How do I feel about it?
To Lily.
May I say?
Lily coldly.
Certainly.
Jimmy rubbing the arm of her chair with the palm of her hand.
Well, if I were on board a ship at this moment, I should be ringing for the stewardess. That's how I feel about it.
Lily throwing herself face downward at full length upon the settee.
Oh, you're just like the rest of our girls on the question of marriage. You're detestable.
Jimmy sliding out of her chair and kneeling at the settee and putting an arm round Lily.
Oh, Lil!
Lily repulsing her.
Yes, you are.
Raising herself upon her elbow.
You'd rejoice to see me draw this boy into my net, wouldn't you? You know you would.
Mrs. Upjohn rises and comes forward.
I dare say you jolly well wouldn't object to catching him yourself if you'd half the chance.
Fiercely.
You try it. You try it. You or any of you.
Jimmy attempting to rise, scandalized.
Oh!
Lily holding her.
No, Jimmy.
Lil, I'm perfectly ashamed of you, speaking to Jimmy Birch in that manner.
Lily dropping her head on Jimmy's shoulder.
Oh.
She doesn't mean it.
I hope not. It ain't exactly pleasant to have a dog in the manger for a daughter.
To Lily.
Why shouldn't young Farncombe turn his attention to Miss Birch, pray, or to any young lady who doesn't object to take your leavings?
Jimmy to Mrs. Upjohn.
Hush, hush, hush.
Mrs. Upjohn walking about.
No, I won't hush.
Jimmy to Lily quietly.
I'll come back in the afternoon.
Lil seems to have got some maggot or other in her brain about drawing Lord Farncombe into her net. Net indeed.
Jimmy, not heeding Mrs. Upjohn, arranges Lily comfortably upon the settee, and then rises and smooths out her skirt, preparatory to departure.
As Lal Roper was saying yesterday, our tip-top aristocratic English families ought to be extremely grateful that strong, healthy professionals of the class of Miss Archer and Miss Travail and Miss Shafto are entering their ranks, and if Lil chooses to be peg-at-it enough.
Jimmy makes a movement towards Mrs. Upjohn.
Have a bottle of ginger beer before you go.
There is a prolonged, playful knocking at the door on the left, followed on the part of those in the room by a gloomy pause.
That is Lal.
Lily groaning.
Oh.
Jimmy drawing a long face. Lily to Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy, stay.
The knocking is repeated. Jimmy retreats to the right as Mrs. Upjohn goes to the door and opens it. Roper is outside. Roper entering in high spirits.
Hello, 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 hello.
Embracing Mrs. Upjohn.
Morning, Ma.
Advancing.
Any more bids for the handsome gilt candelabra with the crystal drops?
To Jimmy.
Morning, Jimmy.
Looking down upon Lily eagerly.
Well, Lil, well, my pet.
Lily in a weary tone, giving him the tips of her fingers, and then turning upon her side with her face to the back of the settee.
How are you, Uncle Lal?
Roper chilled.
Oh, I thank you, Lil.
After a short pause, to Mrs. Upjohn, glancing at Lily.
Not up to much today?
Mrs. Upjohn glumly.
No great shakes.
Dancing too hard, I expect?
A deal too hard.
Roper, after another pause.
Anything else amiss, Ma?
Mrs. Upjohn sitting upon the box ottoman to Jimmy, who is at the piano examining some of the music.
You tell Lal, Jimmy.
Tell?
To Jimmy, who comes to the settee apprehensively.
Jimmy.
Jimmy behind the settee, gravely.
No, the old Pandora isn't going to score this time, Lal.
Isn't going to... I don't follow you.
Be plain, Jimmy.
Jimmy endeavoring to relieve the situation.
Nature's taken precious good care of that in my case.
Roper angrily.
Now look here, Jimmy. A jest is a capital thing in its way. No man has a keener sense of humour than Lal Roper. But there are occasions when it's out of place, and this is one of 'em, my dear. And if it's not putting you to serious inconvenience...
Jimmy also losing her temper.
Oh, well then, have it in the neck. Lil's declined, young Farncombe. There. And when you crack a joke next, Mr. Roper, I beg you'll contrive to favour us with a little variety.
Flouncing away.
Because you bore me pallid with your rotten wheezes, and always have done.
Roper going to Mrs. Upjohn, aghast at the tidings.
Ma.
Mrs. Upjohn to Roper under her breath.
Won't draw him into her net, Uncle.
Won't draw him into a...
Jimmy at the back.
K-N-E-T-T. Net.
Mrs. Upjohn pacifically.
Jimmy.
Jimmy mimicking Roper derisively.
Hello, 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 hello. Fresh fish from the sea. Buy 'em on the beach, buy 'em on the beach, buy 'em on the beach.
Roper to Jimmy indignantly.
Jimmy Birch.
Jimmy sitting upon the fauteuil stool.
Ha, ha.
Roper to Mrs. Upjohn wiping his brow.
Of course there is this to be said, Ma.
Rallying at the idea.
It may be wise of dear Lil to decline Farcombe at first. It doesn't do for a girl, does it, to appear to throw herself at any man, let alone a young fellow of the position, the social status...
Lily suddenly sitting up and putting her feet to the floor again.
Oh, for mercy's sake, cease discussing my affairs in my presence.
To Mrs. Upjohn.
Mother, why do you keep Uncle Lal in the dark?
To Jimmy.
Jimmy, why don't you...
In the dark?
Yes, Lal. You're flying out at Jimmy over her harmless joke. Stopped her finishing.
Finishing?
Lil's not only refused young Farncombe, but she's gone and plighted herself to another individual.
Plighted herself?
Lily passionately.
To one of the best. To one of the best.
Roper stupefied.
Do I know him?
Know him? You know him sufficiently to have plotted and schemed to prevent his being asked to the party last night.
Jimmy to Lily.
Did Lal do that?
Did he?
Impudence.
Roper sitting in the armchair by the centre table, quietly.
Jays.
Nico.
Lily firmly.
Nico.
But the captain
was at the party last